Oh, awesome. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump into our teaching today. Like I said, we're in Acts chapter 10. I'll meet you there in a moment, but for those who don't know what we're doing as a church, our vision for 2026 is this phrase on the screen. It's family on a mission. For the next year, we have been committed as a church to rediscovering and reclaiming and reimagining what does it look like to be a family, not just a place or a program, but to be a community that belongs to one another, that walks with one another, that lives truly like a family. What does that actually mean and look like? And what does it look like for us as a family to live on mission? Not our own mission, not our own private purposes that we have, but actually have this unified mission together. And our mission as followers of Jesus is to be good news people in a bad news world, to declare that Jesus, who lived and died, has risen again and is making all things new. This was the message of the early church, by the way. Before there were all these doctrines we were debating, and before we even had the Bible as we know it, they really just had one story. Jesus died, then he rose again, and he's making all things new. Follow him, be saved, experience the full life that Jesus gave his life for you to experience. This was the message, and it was enough to change the world. It's still changing the world. And it will continue to change the world for years to come, and we are invited to be a part of that mission here and now. And that sounds exciting and great, but what does that actually look like in your cubicle on Monday? What does that actually look like in the coffee shop? What does that look like as we walk the streets of our neighborhoods and navigate the complexities of life together? What does it look like for us to live on mission as a family? That's what we're talking about. And the early church in the book of Acts is the perfect case study of what it looks like to live like a family. They didn't live this life as a bunch of individuals, but they actually lived as a collective, as a family, that they believed they not only belonged to God, but they had this deep sense that they also belonged to one another. And this community of ragtag men and women, nobody that anybody would have been betting on, they ended up turning the world upside down. And so we're learning from their experience and their story in the book of Acts. And today we're in Acts chapter 10. And I actually think this is one of the most important chapters in maybe the entire book of Acts. I mean, there's a few very important moments, of course, and I'm not diminishing that, but this is one moment that if this moment didn't happen, I'm not sure if we're here today in this room, worshiping in this place. So we're going to talk about that. Before I do, this week's kind of a big week for the Clark household. It's actually a big year for the Clark household. So a couple weeks ago, Jenna and I celebrated being married for 20 years. We're an old married couple. And super excited about that. And it's wild. Time flies. And not only that, but like Jenna in February turned 40, which, big milestone for her. I'm still in my 30s, just saying. But that'll change in December when I turn 40. So this year's a year of big moments, right? 20 years together, turning 40. And so we decided, we're not just going to do a bunch of parties. That's not our style. We're like, let's do one big trip, an epic trip that we dreamed about. Let's do that. And so it's a big week this week because on Wednesday we have the opportunity to go to Europe for the first time. Anybody been to Europe before? Yeah? Send me all the tips, all right? Because I've never been there. I don't know what to expect or anything, but I know we're going to see some amazing things. And it's funny because, we all have very different priorities, Jenna, myself, and my daughter, Finley. Jenna has this long list. I mean, it is so long of all the things that she wants to do. Mine is very short. I want to go where Ted Lasso was filmed and drink a pint on the bench, right? I'm a simple guy, right? And so that's kind of my thing. And then Finley, I'm like, what are you most excited for, Finley? And she's like, sleeping on the plane. And I like, okay, I mean, we all got our things, right? It just shows how very few planes she has ever actually flown on. Because I don't know if you're like me, but I actually get a little bit anxious getting on a plane. And not anxious because I'm nervous that the plane's going to go down. That's not the root of my fear. Anxious because I'm scared who I'm going to sit next to for the next few hours. Right? I don't know if that's okay to say out loud, and all my extroverts in the room, you're like, no, I love it. New people, new friends. But for me, I'm kind of in the middle of introvert, extrovert. Right? And so who I sit next to, I feel plays a significant role in what my experience is going to be on that flight, right? And when it's a really long flight, I'm like, oh, oh, Lord, send me someone good, right? And maybe you do what I do, when you're sitting in your row and no one's there. Isn't it just like, it toys with your emotions a little bit, right? Because you're like, maybe I'll just be alone this flight. It'll be absolutely incredible. I'll sit back like a king and enjoy it. But it never happens, right? Because you start seeing the people file in, and maybe you do what I do, and that is you start seeing people file in, and you are immediately judging every person in that line. Come on, we can be real here, right? You're immediately going like, all right, do I want them to sit next to me or not? And you are making a quick assessment on the character of that person based on what you see, right? So maybe you get the guy who walks in with the Hawaiian t-shirt and nothing screams, I'm a talker, more than a guy in a Hawaiian t-shirt, right? And you're going, no, continue moving, move along. And then you have behind the guy with a Hawaiian t-shirt, you have the mom with 3 kids under 4. And you're like, God bless you. I love kids. They're awesome, but not for 10 hours on a flight right now. And you're like, come on, just move way back there. And then you have the person behind them, right, that they're carrying in like a Subway tuna sandwich. And I don't know like what it is. Does anybody like Subway? Like you smell it once, you smell it for a week, right? It haunts your nostrils for a long time. So please, not today in the name of Jesus. They keep moving. But then there's always the person, the chosen one, right? And they always look the same to me. They are wearing $600 noise-canceling headphones, right? And this person is invested in not having a conversation with anybody. You're my kind of person, so sit next to me. You're welcome here, And I guess my point is that you haven't met, or I haven't met one single one of these people. You haven't heard them speak. You don't know their story, and yet we're all guilty of this. That we'll see somebody without really knowing them, and we will quickly file them into the folders of our mind. Like it's this algorithm, right? And it's not the algorithm on your phone, it's the algorithm between your ears. And it's running all the time. It's constantly updating, and it's more powerful than anything Silicon Valley has ever built. And we don't just do this on a plane, do we? We do it in coffee shops while we're waiting in line. We do it at networking events. We do it on the Muni. We do it at parent events at school. And we probably even do it at church sometimes. Your internal algorithm fires on people before they've ever said hello. And all of this, obviously, you're probably there already, all of this obviously brings us to the Apostle Paul, right? Because the Apostle Paul had his own algorithm as well. His was handed down through generations, from campfire conversations with his elders to the Torah lessons from the local rabbi that he learned from as a child. And Peter's algorithm would tell him very clearly who was in and who is out, who is clean and who is unclean, who belonged, who didn't, who God loved, and maybe who God just tolerated. And Peter was living comfortably in this algorithm until one afternoon in a town called Joppa, where God disrupted everything that Peter believed. What happens next in Acts chapter 10 is one of the most pivotal moments in the life of the church. In fact, like I said, I don't think it's dramatic of me to say that if this moment that we're about to read doesn't happen, if Peter doesn't respond well in this moment, that unless you're Jewish today, you might not be here in this place. You might not be worshiping in a church. You might not know the good news of Jesus. That's how significant this moment in Acts 10 is, this moment where Peter's system is completely disrupted. You see, because before Acts 10, devout Torah-believing Jewish men like Peter believed God's love belonged to the Jewish people and only to the Jewish people. And Acts 10 is the moment that Peter's assumption about how far God's love will reach, his assumption gets blown apart. So here's the big idea I want us to see from Acts 10, and it's an idea that we actually must see as a community if we're going to really step into this vision of being a family on mission. Here's the big idea today. If you remember anything, remember this. It is this, that the gospel breaks our boundaries and expands our love. The good news of Jesus Christ, it will expand, it will break our boundaries. It will invite you to go further than you ever imagined, to go to people that you might have otherwise avoided. He will invite you on the other side of your boundaries because He is always expanding your love. And so if we're going to follow Jesus as a family on mission, just know this. Like if you're new to following Jesus or you're considering following Jesus, even if you've been following Jesus for quite some time, let me just remind you, Jesus will disrupt your reality. When you read the teachings and you read the life of Jesus, one thing is for sure, he continued to disrupt the realities of everybody that heard him teach. Jesus' number one goal is not your own comfort. I know that might sound weird. It's not that he wants to intentionally inflict pain or discomfort in your life, but his only goal for you is not that you have the most comfortable life possible. His goal is that you will walk in alignment with the full life he created you for, to walk in alignment with the heart of God. And when we walk with Jesus, he will take you beyond your borders. He will take you beyond your boundaries, and he will expand your love. And I don't know about you, I think we live in a world that we need some bigger tables, don't you think? I think we live in a world where the world is craving a place where people and their whole stories can belong. And I think the church should be known for that, don't you? Like, I think the church should be known as that's that crazy community that loves everybody. Like, and they say it, but they mean it. They love everybody. Why? Because we're good news people in a bad news world. And if we're going to be good news people, then that is going to bring us outside our boundaries and expand our love. So how do we do that? How do we step into this moment that Peter had to step into in Acts chapter 10? The first thing I want you to write down is this. If we're going to be a people where we follow Jesus beyond our borders and boundaries and we expand our love, the first thing we got to understand is Jesus is going to invite us to embrace more curiosity and less certainty. More curiosity and less certainty. Let's jump into the story. Peter is in Joppa, and we're told that he's hungry. Lunch is being prepared downstairs. So while he's waiting to eat some lunch, he goes on the roof to pray. Like, how hangry must Peter have been, right? He's like, I gotta go pray, right? Like, and I feel Peter like that. But when I get hangry, I need to start praying too. But this is what Peter does, and he has this wild vision, this wild encounter with God in Acts chapter 10, verse 9. And here's what it says. It says, the next day, as Cornelius' messengers were nearing the town, Peter went up on the flat roof to pray. It was about noon, and he was hungry. But while a meal was being prepared, he fell into a trance. He saw the sky open, and something like a large sheet was let down by its four corners. And in the sheet were all sorts of animals, reptiles, and birds. Then a voice said to him, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat them." "No, Lord," Peter declared. "I have never eaten anything that our Jewish laws have declared impure and unclean." But the voice spoke again. "Do not call something unclean if God has made it clean." The same vision was repeated 3 times, and then the sheet was suddenly pulled into heaven. Now, this is a really interesting moment, and let me just save you the trouble if you're confused at all. God's not just talking about food here. You know, Peter's going to learn here very quickly that God is actually trying to get Peter to understand something new that God is doing in the world. He's trying to change Peter's view of reality. He's trying to change how Peter looks at people. And so he disrupts him in this moment. And I love this scene. It's actually funnier than we treat it. God shows up to Peter, presents this cosmic picnic of animals that his whole life Peter was told, you cannot eat. These are off limits. They'll make you unclean. And then God says what Peter never would have expected. God says, get up, kill these animals, and eat up. And Peter, classic Peter, indignant, he's like, "No, Lord." And I actually think he did this, right? Like, I think Peter thought, oh, God's testing me right now. And so, no, absolutely not, Lord, which is already a strange sentence because when you're talking to God, it's like never no. It's always yes, right? But only give it to Peter to tell God no. Now, I want you to sit with something for a moment. Peter is so sure that he's right. So sure. That when the voice of God shows up with a different answer, his first move is to correct God, to tell God how he's missing it. He doesn't even pause. There doesn't even seem to be hesitation. No, Lord, Peter is sure, Peter is certain, and he almost missed the new thing that God was wanting to show him and reveal to him. Peter's certainty, this is interesting, his certainty almost became a lid to his faith. And that's interesting because if you were raised in the church, maybe you've experienced church settings where certainty was like the litmus test of your faith. Like if you have a lot of questions, well, you got some work to do in your faith. But if you're really loud and certain and like you know everything you believe and why, and you just have no doubts or questions whatsoever, then we're like, oh man, that person, such strong faith. For a lot of us raised in the church, we measure the maturity of our faith through our certainties, not through our curiosities. And yet here in Peter's story, he actually almost misses what God is doing in him and around him, not because of the questions he had, but because of the certainties he held. It makes me wonder, maybe the greatest barrier to some of our faiths isn't the things we don't know, but maybe it's actually the things we think we know that we're actually wrong about. Like maybe for some of us, the greatest barrier, the lid on your faith is not your questions. It's your certainties that God is trying to invite you beyond. See, it wasn't Peter's questions that almost kept him from experiencing the new thing. It was his certainties. And I remember hearing someone say this. I don't know if somebody else said this and they were quoting them. Tell me if you know. But they said this and they said, I'd rather have questions I can't answer than answers I can't question. And that phrase always resonated with me. I'd rather have questions I can't answer than answers I can't question. And I want you to know, I want us to be a church where we embrace the tension of that statement, where we're not here acting like we have it all together. We're not here saying we understand everything there is to understand about God, because guess what? If you understand everything there is about God, then that means God's no greater than you, and that's a bummer. It means that God's no greater than me, and that's a bummer. Like if God is truly infinite and beyond our capacity to understand, if his ways are greater than our ways, as the scripture says, then that means there should be a lot of questions. And so we're a church that embraces the tension of the question, embraces the gray space where we don't necessarily understand everything there is to understand about God. And if you're new here, I just want you to know that. If you're here and you're like, man, do I have to pretend to have all the answers at Canvas? No, you don't. Come just as you are, questions and all. I bet you I got just as many questions, if not more, than you. See, this is the posture, though, of Peter being invited on the rooftop. It's not so much about curiosity. He was planting his flag in his certainties. And God was saying, I want to invite you beyond what you think is true. I want to invite you beyond the border of your certainties. I'm trying to expand your love. And 3 times God had to repeat himself, by the way. I mean, 3 times, if you know anything about Peter, you know he is incredibly stubborn. So God's like, I know this guy. I'm just going to have to keep repeating it. He has a strong sense of what's clean and unclean, who's in and who's out. His algorithm was installed in Sabbath school when he was probably around 4 years old, and it has been refining itself ever since. And God is like standing at the control panel of Peter's heart, and he's saying, we need to update your operating system. I mean, hear me on this. Peter's categories, and I think this is really important. Peter's categories, I don't think we should stand there and be like, Peter, those categories are so dumb. Like, how could you have such limiting categories, Peter? How could you exclude so many people, Peter? And you just got to give him a little grace here. Like this is the world he was raised in. This is all he ever knew. This was the story that was downloaded into his mind and into his heart since he was a child. It's a story he'd lived in for 30 years. If anything, we shouldn't condemn Peter. We should actually go like, I could be Peter if I'm not careful. Like there are maybe some things, some beliefs, some values I hold, some stories that I held that I received at a young age, and it's all I've ever known, and maybe I'm wrong about some things. Right? Could you imagine how much better the world would be if instead of condemning one another, we would just actually learn one another's stories? To understand how they got where they are, even if you disagree with where they're at. Because all of us didn't get where we are in isolation. All of us are a product of our experiences and our lessons and those that we valued and what they taught us and showed us. And so there might be some categories, some things that are off in us too. So we should probably give Peter a break because we're probably going to need that break at some point for ourselves. But for Peter, his algorithm narrows. It was confirming, it sorts, it was telling him louder every day, like all of us, exactly who we can trust and who we cannot trust. But in Acts 10, the gospel does the opposite. The gospel doesn't actually narrow, it actually begins to widen. It begins to broaden. The table gets extended for more people than Peter could ever imagine. And so if you're going to be a person, if we're going to be a family on mission where we allow God to take us beyond the borders of what we've known, and we allow God to expand our hearts and the love and our capacity to love, it's going to take us saying, God, help me to be a more curious person. Help me to be more curious, and help me to open my hands around some of those things I'm certain about so that you can speak to me and show me where perhaps I'm missing it. The second value, if we're going to be a people moving beyond our borders and expanding our love, is this. It's more welcome and less walls. We're going to have to be a people of more welcome and less walls, and Peter is about to learn this firsthand. While Peter's on the roof arguing with God, something else is actually happening 30 miles up the coast. In the story, we won't read it all because it's a lengthy chapter, but the short of it is a Roman centurion named Cornelius, who, by the way, would have been like the last person Peter would have ever gone to coffee with, a Roman centurion. He was the occupier, and Peter would have been the occupied, right? They were enemies. This Roman centurion also has a vision, and in this vision, an angel tells Cornelius to send for a man named Peter. And so Cornelius, who has never met Peter, sends 3 men on a 2-day journey to find this guy that this angel in this vision told him to go find. What I find so interesting about this is while Peter is wrestling with God about whether outsiders can be in, who's out, what's clean, what's unclean, while Peter's wrestling with this, God is already at work in the heart of the outsider. I mean, you need to think about that. Before Peter's theology was ready, God was already in Cornelius' house. God was already moving in Cornelius' heart. Before the church could update their policies on who can sit at the table and belong in the family, God had already changed the policies. God had already made the call. I guess my point here that Acts 10 reminds me of is that God is never catching up to us. Like, we are the ones catching up to God. The issue is not that we are so loving and God needs to figure it out. The issue is that God is much more loving than we could ever imagine, and he's waiting for us to catch up. He's waiting for us to get on the same page. He's waiting for us to expand our love, to be a part of what he's doing. Now, listen to what Peter says when he finally walks through Cornelius' doors. It's Peter's, he's a character. Here's what he does. He walks through the door. He says this. He says, "You know it is against our laws for a Jewish man to enter a Gentile home like this or to even associate with you." This is the first thing he says to Cornelius. He clearly never read the book, like How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? Like by Dale Carnegie. I mean, this is the worst intro ever. He walks in the room, he's like, all right. You should probably know I normally would never hang out with people like you. But here I am. Classic Peter. He goes like this, and he says, "But God has shown me that I should no longer think of anyone as impure or unclean." And then skip to verse 34. And then he says, "I see very clearly that God shows no favoritism. In every nation, he accepts those who fear him and do what is right." I mean, watch what happened. Peter walked in with a vision about food and then walked out with a revelation about people. I mean, this is just sort of how God works. I want to take a minute or so and explain that maybe some of you have experienced, I guess the way I can explain it, you've experienced like a glitch in your operating system, right? And all of us, if you follow Jesus long enough, you will have this moment that what you believed doesn't match what you just experienced. Like the truth you held, the values you believed in, the stories you were told, there are going to be moments where all of a sudden I believe this, but then what I experienced seems to be incompatible with that. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands because I'm going to just bet all of us on some level have experienced that similar glitch. And that is what's happening with Peter. He had a belief system, and then in this moment, God put a glitch in the system. He disrupted the system. The apps shut down. It didn't work anymore. I don't know how many tech metaphors I can use in a single sermon, but I'm going to keep going with it, right? And maybe for some of you, you've actually thought, this is incompatible. I'm really struggling. I'm experiencing this glitch in my faith. And so you're there, maybe you're here today going, I don't know maybe I just can't have faith. Maybe there is no God. Maybe I'm wrong about everything. Maybe I just need to throw it all away. And maybe you do need to throw some of it away, but maybe not all of it. Maybe you do need to reinvestigate it, because here's my point. When there's a glitch in your operating system, when something doesn't align, is it possible? Is it possible not that you need to throw away your faith, but actually that God is inviting you to a deeper level of it? Is it possible that God is disrupting your reality, not to make you miserable, but so he can open your eyes to something new and beautiful that he's been wanting to show you, to expand your love and to take you beyond the borders of what you ever knew? And this can show up a thousand different ways, that glitch in your operating system, right? It could show up when you've concluded what your coworker was like. You maybe concluded they're just a terrible human being, and then you actually get to know their story. And you realize, they're not who I thought they were. They're actually a pretty kind person. It doesn't match. Maybe a glitch might be a question from your kid. Parents in the room, get ready. That they'll ask you a question about God and faith and the Bible, and they'll get to that age where you just can't give them the Sunday school answer. Like they actually, or it won't work for them. Or they'll press in a little bit more, and you're like, oh shoot, the script isn't working. Or maybe you'll experience something traumatic in your life, a loss in your life, that all of a sudden it brings to question so much of what you thought you believed. Maybe the glitch in the system looks like a person in your life that is on the other side of the political aisle. Like they could not be further from what you believe and maybe even what you stand for. And then you get to know them and you find out they're unexpectedly a kind person. And all of a sudden you're like, what do I do with this? See, I think all of us, if you're growing, you're going to have moments where you experience the glitch. My proposition today is, what if on the other side of that, there's a whole bigger world leaking through? That God is trying to show you something that you've never known before, but God has known, and he's trying to take you beyond the borders of your comfort and expand your love. Because here's the thing we can conclude from Acts 10, and that is that God's algorithm is way bigger than ours. Like his algorithm is bigger than ours. He is serving grace and mercy and redemption to people we have quietly written off, people our feeds have taught us to scroll past, people we've been taught to be afraid of. The glitch in our operating system for some of us is inviting us to finally see people as God sees people, because his love, it's greater than your love. Like, I don't think there's going to be a moment like, I don't know what heaven's going to be like. I'll tell you when I get there. But it's like when I show up, and I don't think I'm going to like show up to heaven and be like, oh, this is it. Like, oh, that's all your love is. I'm going to show up and I think I'm going to be astonished. I think I'm going to be shocked at how much better and bigger and more beautiful God's love actually is. That's what Peter is encouraging. You know, wouldn't it be awesome to believe that and live that now, as opposed to just waiting until you experience it firsthand on the other side of this life? I love how Erwin McManus put it. He says this: the gospel is not a list of who's in and who's out. The gospel is the announcement that God is making a family out of enemies. I love that. A family out of enemies. That's Cornelius and Peter, a Roman and a Jew, an occupier and an occupied, two people who in any normal week would cross the street to avoid one another. And the Spirit of God says, we're not avoiding one another, we're welcoming one another to the same table, to the same family. There's belonging for all people in the family of God. That is the gospel's invitation. More welcome and less walls. And if we're going to follow God in his mission, if we're going to be a people that says, yes, God, I'm going to follow you to the other side of my comfort zone, and I'm going to allow you to expand my love, not only will it take curiosity over certainty, but it will also mean you embracing the value of more love and less limits. And lastly, it will mean us embracing more love and less limits. More welcome, less walls. And then this one, more love, less limits. Watch what happens next in Cornelius' living room. Peter starts preaching a message, and he doesn't even get to finish his sermon, which as a pastor I find offensive. So in verse 44 of Acts chapter 10, here's what happens. It says, even as Peter was saying these things, as he was teaching this message, the Holy Spirit fell upon all who were listening to the message. The Jewish believers who came with Peter were amazed that the gift of the Holy Spirit had been poured out on the Gentiles too. Do you know one other translation, the most literal translation, actually has it saying this, that the Jewish people in the room, they were shocked that the Holy Spirit fell, and it says this, even on the Gentiles. And like the people in the room, they were going like, they were shocked. His Jewish friends, they were going, wait a second, we don't have a framework for this. This doesn't work with our system. This doesn't work with everything that we believed. Are you telling us that even Gentiles, non-Jews, can experience the love of Jesus, the hope of Jesus, the salvation of Jesus? And the answer from heaven in Acts 10 is yes, yes, yes. Even these people too. Even these people too. And that's the part I want us to notice. The first Christians, they were blown away. They were amazed because God's grace reached one category further than they expected. I wonder who these people might be for you. Who are the people that you've written off? That God is like, no, I'm writing them in. Who are the people you were taught to avoid? Who are the people you were taught to be afraid of? Who are the people that you flinch at, that you maybe cross the street when you see them? I'm telling you today, God's love is bigger, His grace is wider, and it's reaching for all people. In John 3:16, it doesn't say, for God so loved some of the world. He says, for God so loved the whole world. Do you think it's true? Do you think God's love really is for the whole world? Acts 10 says, yes, it is. It is. It always has been. It will always be. For God so loved the world that He gave His one and only Son so that what? Everyone, say everyone with me. Everyone who believes in Him, they will not perish but have eternal life. Man, I want to be a part of a church that refuses to be the gatekeepers of God's love. And we are just going to be an open door for all people. And we're going to say, you're welcome here, no walls. You're loved here, no limits. Because God loved the whole world, and so do we. Because here's the reality, you know this. We will never outlove God. Like we will never outlove God. So if you're like, kind of wondering, should I love that person? Yes, because God loves that person. There's never going to be a moment where God's like, whoa, that love's a little too crazy. We will never outlove God. And if we will never outlove God, what does that actually mean for our lives when we show up to our workplaces on Monday? What does that mean for us when we have a conversation with somebody that like we passionately disagree with on some really important topics? What does that mean? What does that mean in our marriages? What does that mean for our enemies? What does that mean when it comes to the person who perhaps even wounded you in your past? What does it mean if we believe that God's love is deeper and wider and bigger and more beautiful than we ever could imagine? See, if you say you want to follow Jesus, but you're not becoming more loving, like if you say, I'm following Jesus, but you're not becoming more loving, I want to say this with kindness, so hear me. If you say you follow Jesus, but you're not becoming more loving, I have to ask, are you really following Jesus? Because the closer you follow Jesus, the more loving we should become. It should just rub off on us. Because however big you think God's love is, Acts 10 tells us, oh, it's way bigger than that. It's way better than that. We live in a time and in a city where people are so purpose-driven, I would say. It's one thing I love about the city. I feel like most people, they moved here for a reason. The issue is that purpose for most of us has become all about what am I going to do? What am I here for? But the mission of God invites us to see purpose entirely in a new light. And that is not what am I here for, but the purpose of God invites us to ask, who am I here for? You want to live a life of meaning? Stop obsessing about what you're here for and start waking up every day and say, who am I here for, and how can I use my job and my talents and my resources and my skills? Like, how do I actually begin to use this to love other people and let them know how much they are loved by this God? And here's the deal. When you ask God for purpose, He will send you to people. And when you ask God for purpose, not only will He send you to people, He'll probably send you to people that you might have otherwise avoided, the people you might have otherwise crossed the street for. And He's going to invite you to love them. The question is, what will my response, what will your response, what will our response as a church be when God says, I want to invite you beyond the border of your comfort zone and I want to expand your love? What will we say in return? And what will happen if we did say yes? The good news is, and I'll end with this, we actually already know what is possible if we say yes. The book of Acts is a documentary of people saying yes. And those people changed the world. And I bet if His church today said yes and followed God into the scary unknown and expanded our love, if we said yes, I bet God could change the world again through us. Yeah. Would you pray with me?